Good day, and welcome to Lesson 5 in our study of the book of Judges. Lesson 5 encompasses chapter 5, and this really is a song written by Deborah herself, outlining the triumph of herself and Barak over the enemies of Israel. And there are two lessons really to be learned from this story. In order to understand this, you have to follow from what happened in the previous chapter, where Deborah encouraged Barak, who was reluctant to go to war against the enemies of Israel without Deborah's assistance. So she encouraged him to get an army of 10,000 to go down from Mount Tabor to the plain to meet the armies of Jeroboam, the king of the Canaanites. The armies of Jeroboam were led by this general Sisera, and they had approximately 100,000 soldiers and 900 iron chariots, which were probably the super weapon of that day. Barak, on the other hand, had about 10,000 men and no chariots. No wonder he was reluctant to go to war, but Deborah proceeded to persuade him and to persuade others to go with him. And in the end, they defeated Sisera and Jeroboam, the king of the Canaanites. This song really explains how this happened and celebrates their victory and celebrates the hand of God in their victory. And the first lesson is really in the first few lines of this song. It says, when leaders lead in Israel, when the people willingly offer themselves, bless the Lord. When you have good leaders who will lead, and the people who will willingly follow those leaders, things can happen. And God can bless those people if they do it in His name and under His direction. These people were doing it with asking God for help, and He did this help. He succeeded in helping Barak defeat the armies of Jabin because of his intervention. And this is what goes on, this story goes on to tell. And she says, hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. Even I will sing to the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. And what she's saying is, take heed, all you kings, all you leaders who are outside the God of Israel. Take heed, because she is going to show that God helps, and she will sing praises to Him as a result. And she says, Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the field of Edom, the Lord trembled and the heavens poured, the clouds also poured water, the mountains gushed before the Lord, the Sinai before the Lord God of Israel. She is explaining what happened when God goes out in His power and in His might. That things happen, that things change, that events can be worked so that they come out in the favor of God and His allies. And it says, in the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael. So before this happened, the situation was so bad. He said the highways were deserted. There was no one traveling on the highways when the Canaanites controlled the land. The village life ceased. There was no activity. There was no association. There was nobody intermingling the way they should be. It ceased in Israel until Deborah arose a mother in Israel, until she came to the forefront and persuaded the leaders of the army, Barak in particular, until she persuaded them to go and fight the king, Jabin, the king of the Canaanites. So before that happened, there was very little commerce, there was very little activity. The streets were deserted. And the reason for this was stated in this one line, because they chose new gods. They chose new gods. They didn't follow the God of Israel, Jehovah, the God of Joshua, the God of Moses. because they choose no gods, and as a result there was no justice. There was war in the gates. There was no true justice in the land. In other words, there was chaos essentially everywhere. Even the people of Israel, even the people who had been previously very good at fighting, very good at supporting their own nation, even they had become somewhat reluctant, perhaps lazy, perhaps not able to go to fight or eager to fight anymore like they had been before. He said there was not a spear or a shield seen among 40,000 in Israel. There was no weaponry. There were no defenses. No one was willing to put themselves forward to defend the nation before Deborah came on the scene. She said, "My heart is with the rulers of Israel who offered themselves willingly with the people. But those people who did go under her request, when she came forward and brought them together," she says, "Bless the Lord. Bless the Lord for those people." She wanted to know that, she said, "Speak, you who ride on white donkeys." Now, white donkeys were really horses. And in order to ride on a horse, you had to be quite wealthy. So she's saying, "Come forward and speak up. You people who are wealthy, who sit in judges' attire, people who are poor, who walk the roads, who run from the noise of the archers along the watering places. There they shall recount the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous acts for his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord shall go down to the gates." When the people react, when the wealthy and the poor together, it says, when the people willingly offer themselves, when these people get together and are willing to recount the righteous acts of God and remember what God had said before. It said before that in Psalm 145, verse 4, it says, "One generation shall give your votes, shall praise your works to another, and shall declare your mighty acts." And this is what needed to be done, because after the days of Joshua, the generations had forgotten what God had done. And therefore what she's saying is, the people who ride on white donkeys, those horses, people who are wealthy, people who walk in the streets who are poor, have to remember this. Count the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous acts for his villages in Israel. Then the people of the Lord shall go down to the gates. And she is saying, awake you people, awake Israel, awake you nations, awake Deborah, sing a song, lead your captives away, O son of Ebed-Om. Barak was the son of Ebed-Om. So she is saying, go down, conquer, win, and lead your captives away. Now it says back in chapter 4 that when the battle was over, when he had turned aside with her in the tent, when all the army of Sisera, previous verse in verse 16, all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword, and not a man was left. But she's saying here, if you had captives, it was the tendency in the day, the way things were done in those days, that when a person conquered another nation, that he led the captives through the villages, through the towns, as in a parade, showing his victory and what he had taken, what he had accomplished. And what she is saying here, if you had people left, if you had your captives left, take them away, sing a song, lead your captives away, O son of Ebed-Om. Then the survivors came down, the people against the nobles. The Lord came down for me against the mighty. What he's saying is that the Lord helped her, helped Barak, helped the armies of Israel come down against the mighty foes of the nation. From Ephraim were those whose roots were in Amalek. There was in this area of Ephraim a mountain called Amalek. And it says, from you were those whose roots were in this mountain, came down from Ephraim, and you, Benjamin, with your peoples. From Mashir, rulers came down, and from Zebulun, those who bear the recruiter's staff, and the princes of Issachar were with Deborah. So she's listing the people who now helped Barak in their fight against the enemies of Israel. And it wasn't just Barak and his army initially, or eventually, although it may have been initially, but others came to help. And others came to fight for them and fight against them. It says, among the divisions of Reuben, however, one of the tribes of Israel, there were great divisions of heart, great resolves of heart. Why did you sit among the sheepfolds and to hear the pipings for the flocks? The divisions of Reuben have great searchings of heart. What she is saying is that there were tribes of the Israelites, who came to help. But there are also tribes that did not. Reuben, for instance, was one of the tribes, one of the nations of Israel that did not really help. They sort of held back, whether out of fear, out of reluctance for some other reason. They held back in their own area. And she is saying, why did you sit among the sheepfolds? Why did you stay among where it was safe? Why did you stay among the sheep? They have to think really carefully about what they did. They have to search their heart for what they did. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. Why did Dan remain on ships? Dan and Asher were sea coast communities, and they stayed on their ships. They stayed to look after their own areas rather than coming to help Barak. So why did Dan remain on ships and Asher continue at the seashore, stayed by his inlets? Zebulun, which is another seacoast area, jeopardized their lives to the point of death. Naphtali also on the heights of the battlefield. So she's really listing those areas, those tribes, those parts of Israel which helped the Israelites in their efforts against the Canaanites, and was criticizing those like Reuben and Dan and Asher, who held back and did not help. Some areas were too far away to be of much help, but those that were close by and did not help were now being singled out. It says the kings came and fought. The kings of Canaan fought. At Tenek, by the waters of Megiddo, they took no spoils of silver. They fought from the heavens. The stars from their courses fought against Sisera. The kings and the people who fought against the Israelites did not come for the plunder, did not come for the spoils. They didn't come, they weren't mercenaries coming for the wealth that they could obtain. But heaven was still against them. It says the stars from their courses fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishron swept them away, that ancient torrent, the torrent of Kishron. O my soul, march on in strength. It is said that, and Josephus, the historian, somewhat verifies this in his histories, that there was a great rainstorm. There was a great hailstone or rainstorm that happened at this time, and the banks of the rivers Kishron overflowed. The waters overflowed the banks, and as a result, the land became very, very wet, muddy. And the chariots, the iron chariots, which were the pride of the army of Jabin, became mired in the mud and became useless. And this is what happened. He's saying the stars fought against Sisera. The torrents of Kishron swept them away, that ancient torrent. O my soul, march on in strength. The horse's hooves pounded, the galloping of his steeds. The horses, with all they could do in trying to drag the chariots, the horses in all their strength, the pounding of the hoofs could not really make a difference. The chariots were mired, the horses became useless. And it says, the ancient torrent, the torrent of Christian, O my soul, march on in strength, the horses' hoofs pounded, the galloping of the steeds. Then she says, curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord, curse its inhabitants bitterly, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Meroz was a fairly large city, close by to the battle, and had apparently promised support to Israel previously, but in this case did not help, did not come to the aid. And as a result, it said, through Deborah, the angel of the Lord cursed the city. It's interesting that was a very major city in those days, but it's not mentioned again in the Bible, nor is its location actually known today. It has ceased to exist. The angel cursed Meroz, and it is no longer there. So what she is doing throughout this section is really illustrating those tribes which came to help Barak and his army, and criticizing those tribes which did not help or which held back for various reasons. This is really the basis of this. But Barak did succeed with the help of God, and it does show what happens when some, at least, of God's people unify, are in unity, and are willing to help each other. And this is the second lesson really of this, is the fact that God wants us to be unified. He wants unity in our lives, in our churches, in our walk, but he wants unity. What he wants to do is see people do things in a way which support each other, help each other, and not be divisive. Satan loves divisiveness. This is one of his main goals, is to divide, as it says, to divide and conquer. This is what he's doing. So the first lesson is that when great leaders lead and people follow, God will bless. The second is that when we are unified, when we work together, when we try to do things in unity, there's also going to be blessings and success. So this is the second main lesson of this chapter. And he goes on down to say, now, Deborah goes on to continue, most blessed among women is Jael, the wife of Eber the Kenite. Now, again, everything in the Bible seems to have a meaning, because the meaning of Deborah is bee, and the meaning of Jael is mountain goat. The meaning of the husband, Heber, is team. So the team of Samantha and Jael together really is the team of what you might call milk from mountain goat, honey from the bee. And the promised land was supposed to be a land of milk and honey. And then he says, blessed is the women in tents. He asked Jabin, Sisera, when he escaped Barak's army, came to the tent of Jael for comfort and for refuge, thinking that she, being of a Kenite, would be an ally of his, not suspecting that he would be set upon by her. So he asked for some water. She gave milk and cream in a very lovely dish, in a fancy dish, in a dish which is more than would be expected. So she served this general milk and cream in a very fancy dish, which sort of made him feel that he was among friends. and he was in a place of safety. So, when he had fed on this and became sleepy, and when he was sleeping, she, through a tent peg, killed him. She dispatched him with a tent peg through the skull. Not a very pleasant thought, but this is what happened. Her right hand to the worker's hammer pounded the Sisera and pierced his head. He died at her feet. He died at the feet of a woman. And as it was, as she had said, as Deborah had said in chapter 4, that he would fall under the hand of a woman. She said, I will deliver him into your hand, but it would be through a woman. Thinking at the time it was going to be Deborah, but it was actually this woman Jael who dispatched Sisera at the time. And it goes on to say, the mother of Sisera looked through the window, cried out through the lattice, wondering why his chariot was so long, because she was expecting this great general, leading this great army, to go home. And also to bring him presents. Bring her presents, bring her spoils. Are they not finding and dividing the spoil to every man, a girl or two? It says that he was probably a womanizer. She did not mind the fact that he was with other women when she was waiting at home. And this is part of the pagan religion, part of the pagan culture, that this would happen. She did not mind this. She just wanted the spoils, the money that he would bring home. She did not know that he was dead, that he would not be coming home. So it says, for Sisera, plunder of dyed garments, plunder of garments embroidered and dyed, 2 pieces of dyed embroidery for the neck of the looter. Bringing her home embroideries. Bring her home fine silks, fine tapestries, fine garments from his looting. This is what she was looking for, not knowing that he was dead, that his army had been defeated, that there had been a complete change in the fortunes that she had expected. This is what happens sometimes when we put too much faith in what we have rather than the God above. So God blesses people when they're led by strong leaders and the people support those leaders. He blesses that. And the second thing is he wants us to be unified, to go in unity as much as possible. And he also will support that as well. And it says, and it ends up by saying, let all your enemies perish, O Lord, and let those who love him be like the sun when it comes out in full strength. She was saying, let all your enemies perish. Let all your enemies be defeated. Let your people succeed. Let your people who love you shine like the sun, come forth in glory and in brilliance, and then come out in full strength. And what happened was that the unity of the Israelites, even those who had succeeded in helping Barak defeat Jabin, the unity of the Israelites did succeed. And for the next 40 years, they grew in strength and in cohesiveness because of what Deborah and Barak had accomplished in the face of overwhelming odds and with the help and support of a loving God. So this is the whole song of Deborah. It's apparently a song that was actually written by her and is included in its entirety here. So this explains what she is trying to say. It's a song of praise to God, a song of praise and acceptance to those nations which helped Barak and the Israelites, and a sort of a criticism of those nations which did not, and also the end result of Sisera at the hands of another woman, Jael. Let all your enemies perish, O Lord, and let your people shine forth, brilliant as the sun. So next week we're going into chapter 6, the first part of chapter 6. But that's all for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you next week. Bye for now.